This video is about ecology. There's tons and tons of things that we could talk about with ecology, so this is just a brief overview of what you should know to prepare for the STAAR. We'll start with some basic vocabulary. There's a big difference between a habitat and a niche. The habitat of an organism is the place where an organism lives. The niche is the organism's role in the community. So an example of a habitat would be a forest. Example of a niche would be the seed gatherer in the forest that lives in the trunks of trees. Then there's different vocabulary that we can use to describe how an organism gets energy. So a producer is also known as an autotroph, and those are organisms that make their own food, for example, plants. Consumers or heterotrophs are organisms that eat their food, for example, animals. Finally, decomposers recycle dead matter, so they break down food that is already dead, and those would be fungi. Those are your basic vocabulary that you would need to know to be successful in ecology. Next, you will need to know how to read a food web. The predator-prey relationships of living organisms are shown in food webs. Each feeding level is called a trophic level. And at the bottom of every food web there are producers, like this grass, which gets their energy from sunlight. Consumers are named based on their order in the food web. There are primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary consumers. Scientists use energy pyramids to show the loss of energy between trophic levels. At each trophic level, only 10% of the total energy is passed on to the next trophic level. The most energy in an ecosystem is at the producer level. So right here, there's 1,000 kcals of energy, and at each level we lose 10%, so that at the tertiary consumer level, there's only 1 kcal left. Let's talk about ecological succession. Succession occurs when there is a disturbance in a community, like a disaster. There are two major types. In primary succession, no living matter or soil survives. For example, a glacier melts or a volcano erupts. Those two disasters destroys all living things, including soil. In secondary succession, the soil survives. So that might be an example like deforestation or hurricanes or forest fire, where soil is still existing in the community after the disaster. The pioneer species is the first species that colonizes an area during primary succession, but are then replaced by other organisms. Usually when we talk about pioneer species, we use lichen as an example. The climax community is a stable community that results after the newly formed community has reached a sense of balance. So in this picture right here, this is a diagram depicting primary succession. There's just rock in the beginning because the disaster destroyed all the soil. When lichen move into the environment, they start breaking those rocks down, and slowly but surely it makes room for smaller plants, a little bit bigger plants, and then even bigger plants, and finally we reach the climax community. At the climax community, we don't see that many lichen left because they've been replaced by other organisms. Finally, our last topic in ecology would be relationships among organisms. There is predation, where one organism kills and eats another. There's also competition when two or more organisms try to use the same resources. Usually, this results in one organism's population decreasing. Or if they are in the same species, so these two animals right here are fighting each other, maybe they're fighting each other for a sexy mate. Or maybe they both want this hunk of grass. I think they eat grass. I don't know. Well, they're competing for the same resource, and so usually one would probably die out or get scared away. There's another type of relationship, however, and that's called symbiosis. These are relationships where two organisms live together. In mutualism, both species benefit, so they're both very happy. In commensalism, one species benefits, but the other one, doesn't really care if that species is there or not. It's neither harmed nor helped. The last type of symbiosis, though, is when one species is benefiting and the other one is harmed. That would be a parasite example.